Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to my first pumpkin flip of the fall season this year. I will be doing a total of 3 of these medium to large size thrift store pumpkins, and each one will get its own video just to keep it into a more manageable time frame for both me and you, the viewer. The next video should be uploaded in just a couple of days, so be on the lookout for that. Well, it is Create Day, my friends. Let's get started. This is one of 3 pumpkins I picked up from Goodwill. It has that textured surface on it, and I'm going to go over that with some joint compound to make it a different kind of texture. But the first thing I needed to do was remove the stem. I'm not going to be using this stem. So I just used my X-Acto knife to cut around that and pull it out. Now to change up that texture a little, I'm using dry Dex Joint Compound. So it's time to glove up and prepare to get messy. I'm going to smooth this on with my fingers, trying to get an even coverage over all that texture. I do not want the joint compound to settle down into those grooves too much because I don't want to lose that. So I just spread this around, cleaning out those recessed areas, the grooves, with my finger to make sure it's not too thick in there. And I don't need total coverage, but I just want to change that texture up to something that I like a lot better. Once that was dry, I'm just sanding down any peaks or little pokey things, giving it a more uniform appearance, but it still has lots of texture. Then I'm going to give it a coat of my matte clear sealer spray paint. That's because this joint compound will reactivate when you start getting any moisture on it like paint. Up next is my IOD Sunflower Mould. I'm using the DAS air dry clay to make a large sunflower that I'm going to be putting on the top of the pumpkin. Once I have that out of the mold, I go ahead and put a little bit of water on my mat and just use my fingertip to go around those edges to make sure they're nice and smooth. Be sure to check out the description box for a list of all the products I used with links to the products. Now I need to cut out the center portion so that I can put my stem in place once I get this all on the pumpkin. So I started small. I wasn't sure how big that needed to be, just taking my X-Acto knife, dipping it in water so that I get a nice clean cut, trying it on for size, and I realized that hole needed to be a little bit bigger. So I go ahead and make another cut or a little further out on that inside center of the sunflower. Okay, so that's a much better fit. I'm going to use my finger dipped in water to smooth that out. And then I will attach this to my pumpkin with my Titebond Quick and Thick. I want to press down all those little petals into that pumpkin without distorting them. So you just want to be careful that you're pressing enough that it's adhered properly without actually flattening out your petals. Now this next step is not necessary. I am using white gesso to go over this casting, and that was because it was getting late and I didn't know for sure what color of paint I wanted to use. Normally I would just paint right away with a fresh casting. So I let that sit overnight, and then the next day I used Fusion Mineral Paint in the color Parchment to do 2 coats over the entire pumpkin. This paint has a built-in top coat, which makes it great as a base coat, especially when you're going to be layering other paints on top. Next up, I want to decoupage this napkin that I got from Dollar Tree. I'm going to lay this out and figure out which parts I want. I know I want to cut out one of the crows, and I want to use a lot of that text that's on there as well to layer behind and around the crow. I separate the napkin. It's only 2-ply and it comes apart really easily. And then I'm going to cut out this first section so that I can work on just the crow. I'm using a paintbrush dipped in water to go around the edges of this so that I can just tear that out and still have that nice little ragged organic edge around the crow. I'm going to use the same procedure to cut out all of the little sections of text that I want to use. The decoupage medium I'm using for this is DIY's Liquid Patina. I find that this works better than Mod Podge when it comes to these really fragile napkins. This is a less thick, lighter type of medium. With Mod Podge, because at least the one I have tends to be a little thick and I tend to get more tearing. It's just more difficult to work with on these super thin napkins. So I found that the DIY Liquid Patina does work better for this. I'm brushing that on and then just very carefully smoothing him down into all those little grooves. And then I go around the edges to seal those edges. But I'm not going to completely seal this whole thing until the first layer has dried. I'm going to do the same thing with all my little sections of text. Now that everything's on there and it's pretty much dry, I go over the entire thing with another coat of the DIY Liquid Patina. I decided to add a couple of the small sunflowers and leaves onto the bottom section below the crow. So I'm just making those out of that same mold with my air dry clay, and then I will place those into position with the Type Bond Quick and Thick. And while those castings are still fresh, I'm giving them a coat of the Fusion paint in the color Parchment. I'm using traditional burnt umber acrylic paint to start the process of the sunflower on the top. I'm using this to color in that top rim and the inside where the stem will go. Next up is Georgia clay. I'm going to do this on that top edge, blending it into that burnt umber. Next, I'm taking yellow ochre, and this is going to be my kind of like my base color for my sunflowers. What I'm going to do is brush this on and then using a baby wipe, wipe off the raised areas, kind of leaving this just down in those recessed areas. This is one of my favorite techniques for getting layered paints onto your project. It's super simple and I mean it's pretty much fail proof, but it just adds a really nice effect to your project. And this is how it looks with that first stage done. I'm going to repeat the same thing up at the top of the sunflower. I'm overlapping just slightly on that Georgia clay that I painted around the rim there. and I don't go all the way to the edge of the petals. I just go about halfway, and then I'm wiping that back just like I did on the bottom ones. The next color I'm using is called Golden Straw, and I'm going to water this one down just a little bit to give it a little better flow and the ability to blend it with the previous color, and then wipe it back. Only this time, especially since it is watered down, I'm not going to use a baby wipe to wipe it back. I'm just going to use a dry cloth. And these rags I got, they're lint free and they are absolutely wonderful. I will leave a link below in the description box. For the leaves, I'm starting with a base coat called Woodsy Smoke. I want a brown undertone to put my greens on top of so that I will get a little bit of that fall, things are turning color kind of effect on my leaves. And now for the greens, I'm using leaf green and forest moss. I am applying the leaf green first, wiping some of it back with a baby wipe, and then I will start blending in the other green. I do the same thing with those little stems on the bottom of the sunflowers. I apply some of that leaf green and then the forest moss over that. Now I'm going to use my Jolie finishing wax in the color black. I made the mistake, as I have done before, without putting any clear wax on first. I could not wipe this back to my satisfaction. So I went in with the clear wax and right over the top of that black wax, and then you can wipe it back better. So then I knew, okay, I need to cover the entire sunflower with the clear wax first, wipe it back, and then I can go in with the black wax and get the effect I want. So with that clear wax, it was really important that I got it around the edges of that casting that meets up with that white pumpkin so that I didn't end up with too much of the black wax adhering to that stark white pumpkin. So it was an extra step to do this, but I absolutely love the way the black wax sits in all those little details and just gives it such a cool little aged look. I did that same clear wax on the sunflowers and leaves on the front, and now I'm applying my black wax, and then I will wipe that back. You can see the difference when it's all on there and then you start wiping it back. It's just amazing the difference it will make having these waxes on there. I love the way that looks. Now at first I wasn't sure if I was going to do this or not, but I did decide to go ahead and add the black wax to the entire pumpkin. So I first did the entire pumpkin in the clear wax, wiped that back, and then went in with the black. Now for my stem, I'm using this chunk of branch that I picked up somewhere. I just cut it to size. And I'm putting some antique wax on that fresh cut end. It took a couple of coats of this to make it look like it's just not quite so fresh. And then in fact, I think even with that, it wasn't quite dark enough, and I put a little coat of acrylic brown paint on it. Once that was all dry, I'm using the Folk Art Select Seal Clear Matte Sealer because this was really dried out and I wanted to just kind of freshen it up a little bit and give it some protection from, like the oils on your hands and whatnot touching it. I just thought it would be good to be protected. I'm using the Type Bond Quick and Thick this was not a perfect fit into that center. So I put the glue on the bottom and on the sides where it touches that inside of the pumpkin and the casting. And I'm using a brush to remove that excess glue. I let that dry overnight, and now I'm filling in around it with some hot glue just to make that extra secure. When that hot glue is fully dry, I'm going to go over it with some of the dark brown paint just to kind of conceal it a little bit before I go on to adding the embellishments. I've got some raffia here that I'm just going to tie in a knot kind of off to the side, and then I'm going to secure that into place with a little bit of hot glue. I'm using an old curling iron to add a little shape and movement with this raffia. I don't really like working with raffia, but this makes it a little easier for me to work with it. It's just one of those things, like I just want to have more control over it, I guess, and this stuff is just so darn stubborn. But I thought it would look nice on this particular project. Now these are a couple little leaves from one of my floral picks. This one, I think that's from Hobby Lobby, maybe Michael's, I'm not sure. And I like these, but they were too long, so I'm going to cut that off and then reestablish the little crease that was originally there just by adding a little drop of hot glue, folding it up, and then I can attach that to the pumpkin with another little spot of hot glue. Now I'm just going to add some different florals. I've got paper ones, I have silk ones, and I'm just going to add in different little bits and pieces from different picks and different things that I have in my stash. There's a little piece of eucalyptus, I do some of that. Just whatever I thought would be fitting for this. And then I make a little hang tag for it. It's a double-sided hang tag that was really simple to make. I just Mod Podged a couple of pieces of napkin onto a Amazon ready-made tag out of cardstock. But before we get to the final reveal, here's a sneak peek at the next video. It's a fairy house pumpkin that lights up. How cute is that? Okay, here's the final reveal of today's project. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you find my content useful and will like and subscribe to my channel. But more importantly, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.